Gallup have been researching this subject for at least a decade, and they have discovered that all of these things are impacted. When people are engaged, customers are happier, company makes more money, people are more productive, there's less staff turnover, there's fewer issues around safety, there's less people stealing from their company, there's less sickness, there's less defects in terms of quality. So loads and loads of positive benefits. In addition, there's been other research that shows that better mental health, less stress, people feel better, fewer burnouts, etc., etc., etc. So there's really an enormous number of benefits in helping people to be engaged at work. What does it actually mean and how do you feel? Well, when you're engaged, you have the feeling that time is flying. You even forget that you're working. People build, employees have more energy and there's more mental resilience. People feel enthusiastic and proud of their work. So that's what we're aiming for. But let's have a look now at what the reality is across the world. So Gallup, as I mentioned, have been doing research for about a decade. They've been researching globally, and I want to focus in on Europe. I wasn't able to find more up-to-date data for Europe. This is the most up-to-date data available. 10% on average, according to this data, of the European workforce is engaged. About 70% is disengaged, and that the remaining 20% are actively disengaged. Now we need to take this in context. In general, professionals have a higher level of engagement. Also, if you've got a high level of education, you are likely to have a higher level of feeling engaged. I did see other data that was slightly more optimistic. It shows that in Europe, the figure is about 30%. The US is everywhere showing higher. And apparently the continent that is more disengaged than the others is Asia. And Asian societies tend to be quite hierarchical. And I think that might have quite a lot to do with the levels of engagement. Gallup have been continuing to do surveys throughout the COVID period. And 1 month it was like, yeah, there's more engagement. Another month there's less engagement. So it's been fluctuating. And I think it's quite difficult to make any firm conclusions about that. Because this is the PMI conference for Belgium, Luxembourg, and for the Benelux, I put the 3 country figures that I got. So the Netherlands seems to be doing slightly better than Belgium, and apparently Luxembourg is doing less well than either of Belgium or the Netherlands. I don't know enough about the data or the reasons for that, but I think it could be interesting to pursue. So as Saskia has said to you, please feel free to put any questions in the chat, and at certain moments I'll be pausing so that we can answer your questions. So I'd like to introduce a framework to you, which is based on my studies of engagement and what is necessary. So for engagement to work, you're actually going to need to have all 3 of these components: a sense of purpose, having a sense that you are the locus, you maintain the locus of your control, and a sense of community. So it's not you just need one, you kind of need as many of them as possible. Each one is going to build on the other. So they're not completely independent, they're really interconnected, as we'll see as I present each of them. So I would like to start talking about the sense of purpose. So first of all, I want to talk about the why. The why, you know, a lot of people are talking about having a why. That's very important. But I want to actually go into it a little bit so that we all understand what we're talking about. So Ken Robinson wrote this book called The Element. And in it, he talks about the element being your natural combination of your natural aptitude and your personal passion. So those two things are part of the why, but in actual fact, you also need to think about what the world actually needs. So it might be that you think about not necessarily the world in its bigger sense, but it might be what is useful for the project or what is useful for your company. So having a sense of what you're good at, why you're good at it, what you love doing, and what's useful will bring you your why. Now, that's in an ideal world, but not everybody necessarily has got a sense of their why when it comes to the professions. It may be that some people have got a why that is supported by work, but is not necessarily created by the work environment. So it might be that you've got a colleague who is engaged at work because he knows that he wants to support his family so that they can live in a nice house and have nice holidays, etc., etc. Or it might be that one of your colleagues is an aspiring jazz musician. They're not ready to make that their full-time profession, but they're dedicating themselves to their music and they need the job to support them. So in some ways, it's really, really good to have a work-related purpose. But even if you don't, a non-work related purpose is still going to improve your mental health and make sure that you're engaged at work and also keep your stress levels down. So even if you've got people on your team who are not super motivated by the job itself, it might be interesting for you to talk with them to see what does motivate them if it's not coming from the workplace. So why is it important to have a sense of purpose? Well, it's been shown from the research, and these days there's quite a lot of research into this kind of psychological work. The research shows that people who've got a sense of purpose have got a much lower stress levels, and they're much less likely to suffer from illnesses, from heart attack, etc., etc. So there was one, I want to share with you one experiment that was done. And it was done with people from an old people's home. And they took the residents of the old people's home and they divided them into 3 groups. The first group were told that they were given a plant and they were told that it was their responsibility to look after the plant. The second group of people were told, well, here's a plant, but the staff are going to take care of it for you. You don't have to do anything. The third group of people were not given a plant. And they did this research over an 18-month period. And at the end of the 18-month period, it turned out that the people who were given the plant and told to look after it, they were twice as likely to still be alive. They were also shown to be happier, have better rates of health, and to have more active lives. So I think this is an interesting study that shows that, you know, if you've got a sense of purpose, they're very, very concrete benefits. So once you have your own sense of purpose, it's also really good if you can connect it to the sense of purpose of other people around you, so that, you know, your purpose links to the purpose of your project team, of your company, and the purpose of the project overall. So ideally, everything should be aligned and there should be no conflict between the two, between everybody's purposes. So not only do you need a sense of purpose, but in an ideal world, you also want to make sure that you have an intrinsic motivation for doing whatever it is. So an intrinsic motivation means it's coming from the inside of you. So an example of that is you want to become a master at being a project manager or being an accountant or being a lawyer, whatever your speciality is. Now, if you're aiming for mastery, it means that whatever happens, you're going to turn into a growth opportunity. And I want to refer to a lady called Abby Wambach, who you may know is or was a champion, a female football champion. And she won several Olympic medals. And eventually, so she in her book, she talks about the commitment of the team. And apparently, before the team went onto the pitch, they would see a photograph of a recent defeat that they had against a major opponent. And for a long time, she didn't really understand what all this was about. But eventually she realized that if you can use your failure to fuel future successes. And apparently the team that following year went on to win the World Championships. So that's just an example of how you can use a negative thing and turn it into mastery, so that really whatever happens to you, it's serving, and you're really aware that it's serving a higher goal. So my question is, the next thing is about the locus of control. And the question is, who is pulling your strings? We all want to have control over what you do. It's been shown to be less stressful. And if ever any one of you had a micromanager as a boss, you will know exactly how demotivating it is. I want to share with you the results from a study that was done back in the 70s by a young doctor whose name was Michael Marmot. And he was very interested in the relationship between the work that you do and your health. Specifically, he was interested in mental health, stress, and risk of heart attack. So he did a very complex study involving interviewing 18,000 British civil servants. It took them several years to complete the study, but they were very, very surprised when the results came in, because everybody was expecting that, you know, the more senior people would be under more pressure and therefore they would suffer more from stress. But in actual fact, it was the exact opposite. The people at the bottom were 4 times more likely to have to suffer a heart attack and to suffer from stress than the people at the top. They found a direct inverse relationship between heart attack risk and the job ranking. So Michael Marmot got really curious, and he started asking questions like, well, so why is it that people with who have a good education and a good stable job, but slightly lower in the hierarchy, why is it that they have a higher risk of the heart attack than people with a slightly higher status job? So he goes back and he does more research. So in this, the next experiment he did, he started looking at a group of people that were in some ways very like. They were all within the same band of a job. In the same office, they had more or less the same rate of pay. The only thing that was different about them was the amount of control that they had over what they were actually doing. And the results confirmed what they were thinking, that the more control you have over your work, the less stress you have. But in addition to that, it was also showing that those people felt better overall. They tended to have more friends and they tended to have a better social life. So this also confirms another thing, that if one area of your life is going well, then it can pull the other areas up. But likewise, if you've got an area that's pulling you down, it can also affect in other areas. So stress and disengagement doesn't come so much from boredom and monotony. It comes from not being autonomous. It comes from not being able to take responsibility. So if you're wondering what you can do to help your team feel more engaged, then think about the responsibilities that you're giving them. And as for yourself, as much as possible, you should be setting your own priorities. Obviously, you need to align with other people in the organization. You need to align with the client, et cetera, et cetera. But as much as possible, you should be setting your own priorities, and you should be encouraging your team to figure out their own priorities as well, as long as, within the constraints of the project that you're involved with. So once you have your priorities, it's then very important to be able to stick to them. If something comes in that is not within your priorities, you need to find a way to say no, and you need to keep your boundaries. So sometimes you're not in complete control of what you get given, and sometimes you have to accept things that you don't really want to. So if you're feeling overloaded and your boss is giving you something new, you need to ask him, so I'll take this on, but what is it that I've got to put down instead? Because the truth is that most people these days are given stuff that it's actually not realistic for them to deliver. So something will have to be dropped. And when you do say no to something, I suggest you follow the advice of Brian DeHaaf. He is the CEO of AHA Company, which apparently is one of the fastest growing companies in the US. He says that it's very important that you should be transparent and that you let the person know that you've heard their request. You should then respond as quickly as you can, which gives them a chance to come up with another option. And finally, you should let them know why you're saying no to them. So it means that maybe another time they would come back to you and ask you for something else that you would be willing to do. It's very important that you keep the relationship with the person. And also it makes it much easier for the person to hear. So you're showing some empathy and compassion. Now, in the short run, when you start saying no to things and people, it might be difficult for people to hear it because they're so used to you accepting it. But in the long run, overall, you would be respected for holding your ground and for keeping healthy boundaries. And it's part of you growing as a leader. You may ask the question, should I be encouraging my team to say no to requests? Well, actually, I advocate that you should. Recently, I was talking to the head of one of the technical schools in Brussels, and he started telling his team, every time there's something new that I ask of you, that's a big ask and it feels overwhelming, then please tell me what I should put down instead. He says that once he started doing that, the team are much more motivated, they're more engaged, and that everybody is more on the same side. Everybody's pulling together much more. So it's working really well for him. So you may be a bit mystified at the moment. And in actual fact, there are people that have come up with a system called job crafting. I don't know, maybe you've heard about it. Justin Berg and Jane Dutton, they're psychologists at Yale University. And their idea has come from interviewing people who we thought normally would have rather monotonous jobs like cleaners. It turned out that some people, they kind of see their job as a rather monotonous job, but there are other people within the cleaning teams who are motivated and have their sense of purpose because they feel that they're helping people, they feel that they're contributing, they're doing things that they feel are necessary, and they feel very motivated. So in this job crafting, you're actually choosing the jobs that you want to do based on your strengths and interests. And they're even suggesting that you can have a job crafting exchange where, for instance, different people on a project team may choose to reallocate some of their responsibilities according to preference and aptitude. So the locus of control, as we've been talking about, is not only about setting your own priorities, it's also about making sure that you have an appropriate level of challenge. If the role is too easy, it can be unmotivating. So you need to find your own purpose within the framework that's been set for you. So I'm working with different business leaders at the moment. And, one of the things you could do is you could delegate. But the business leaders, actually, sometimes they find it quite hard to delegate. They get quite attached to certain things. And they say, well, it would be quicker for me if I could do it myself. I'll still have to look at it again. The employee is never going to do it as well as I could do it. But in actual fact, when you delegate, you're empowering your team to build up their skills. And you're also freeing up yourself to do the work that's much more interesting for you. I was working with one guy recently, and he really wanted to be involved in a role that he had on a global team. But he found that he was very wrapped up in the local role that he had, largely because his performance was measured against the local role, not the global role. However, he realized by working together that if he could delegate the bulk of his local role, he could still manage it and track the outputs, but then he could be dedicating his time to the work that he found much more engaging. And he was also changing his role in the local team because he was managing much more. And it was a benefit not only to him, but also to his colleagues who were getting new responsibilities. If that gets too challenging, it can become overwhelming. So I have another example of this with another business leader that I'm working with. She's working for a global company that is in the throes of a rather major reorganization. It's the kind of thing where everyone across the world is having to reapply for their jobs. And needless to say, there are quite a few redundancies. So her old job, she was on rotation, so that was going to end anyway. She applied for the 3 jobs that she actually wanted, that were at more senior to her role, but at a good level of challenge. And instead of getting recruited for one of those jobs, she got told that she would be given a job at a much higher level, and she didn't really want it. Her new job now was to bring 3 disparate departments into one, because apparently in the past there'd been a lot of overlap between the different departments. And she was told that she had to manage the transition. And some of those departments she had no experience of. And this was very distressing for her. It was quite overwhelming her. She felt that, she was a very good manager, but this was a very high stretch for her. So here is an example of a high-level person who's at risk of disengagement. She didn't want the role. She's kind of in over her head, and she wasn't given the option to choose something more at an appropriate stretch level for her. So why do I share this example with you? Well, it might be that, at their level, you might have a team member who might be feeling over their head in the work that they're doing. So you would then need to support that person at an appropriate level. And also, I suggest that you could link your success to theirs. Because if you're managing a project and there's somebody who's underperforming, obviously you're not completely responsible for their performance, but you also, your role as a manager is also to make sure that that people are performing as well as they can. So the locus of control is also about keeping your energy and your attention on the things that you can control. There are a lot of things out there that we can't control, like, for instance, obviously the COVID, like a company restructuring. But if you focus on the things that are outside of your control, you're focusing on uncertainty. This can lead to fear, this can lead to distrust, and that leads then to engagement. So it's important that you keep your attention where you can actually change things. So it's interesting with the lockdown, many people were working at home. Many people were making more choices about actually when they were working. If you want to, you can stay in your pajamas until the evening and probably nobody will know, whereas you wouldn't be doing that if you had to go to the office every day. So in terms of the challenges that we're facing, it's quite hard to say, is it better now or is it worse now? I think we can say that it's different. Community, as we've been talking about, you need to work, you need to be in an environment where you feel that you belong, where you feel that you're appreciated and that you're valued. You need to feel respected, and you need to get some your good work recognition. You also need to feel that you're being treated fairly. So these are all things that are going to support you, and it's all about being part of a community. And as you just mentioned, it's much harder now that we're not going to the office. So you have to be more intentional about it. From the people that I'm working with, a lot of teams are having, you know, virtual coffee breaks so that the personal connection is maintained. And, you know, there might be some resistance. It's like, why would I take, you know, I've got so many meetings already. Have I really got to take 15 minutes to just chat about nothing, to chat about my children, to chat about my holidays or whatever it is? But in actual fact, those people that are doing it are finding that they're able to stay in much better contact, and they're feeling better about their work. So I want to talk also about the fact that we are wired for connection. So in this slide, this is a picture of the ventral vagus nerve. And you'll see that the whole of the face is full of nerve endings, also especially around the eyes and especially around the ears. So you may have heard people talk about the fact that we are wired for connection and that we want to feel connected with other people. Well, it's actually very literal. We are wired for connection. It's the social engagement system, which is part of the ventral vagus, the job of the nervous system. So we need to have this feeling, and therefore, and it helps us to feel calm and regulated. And I'm sure you've all had the experience, like after an upsetting day, you had a talk with a friend or perhaps a member of your family, and that's helped you to unwind because you've activated your social connection system. So taking time for coffee is definitely important. It's also important that you take time to recognize that you have things in common with your team. And sometimes that comes naturally because you're in a team and you feel that you've got a lot in common with the people that you're working with. Maybe you're all of a similar age or in a similar life situation, but maybe you feel that you're the odd one out. Maybe you're, you know, younger than everyone else. Maybe you're older than everyone else. Maybe you're the only single person. You know, maybe whatever. Maybe everyone lives in one place and you live somewhere else. So if that happens, it's then really important that you start digging a bit and that you start looking for things that you have got in common with people. It might be that you share a passion for jazz with somebody that you maybe had never noticed before. So it's really important that you make the effort. And I think especially now when we're seeing each other much less, it becomes even more important that you take the time to see what you have got in common with people. And, you know, if all else fails, it's important that you're in the whole situation that we're going through, we're all having to go through it, and to find empathy for other people, and to recognize also that, you know, these other people, they're also human beings who have got the same basic needs and the same basic worries that I do. So connecting with other people, finding a sense of empathy and a sense of empathy for yourself as well is part of this thing about building community, which is why these virtual coffee breaks are so essential. So the other thing I wanted to refer to is the need to build trust, to give people recognition, know people, recognize that people are valued, etc., etc. This is very, very important. It's also important that you have a common sense of values. So I want to share with you why it's important. Well, it comes out of the research that was done by somebody called Christina Maslach, who was doing research into burnout again back in the 70s. And she identified that it wasn't only overwork that was triggering burnout, but all these other things like a sense of being valued and a sense of fairness in the work environment, etc., etc. So there's one more thing that I want to mention about building community, and you may already know about it. It's being written a lot these days in the business literature. It's talking about the fact that to be a good manager these days, it's really that you're needing to coach your people, be much less of an instructor. So it means that your role is much more about asking questions that get the person to reflect on their situation more than it is telling them what to do. It's about listening more than you're speaking. And it's also about getting curious so that you can really understand your team better and help them to find their own solutions. So not only will this help to support your team to develop themselves, it will also help to deepen your connections with the team. It will build more trust and create better communications and therefore better engagement. Informal channels of communication alive, whether you're chatting on WhatsApp or whether you're having virtual coffee breaks or whatever, so that the collaboration continues, that you need to stay in contact with each other, and whatever way is going to work for you. I don't think there's a one size fits all answer to that question, but I do want to share with you one more insight, and this I get from a book called Conscious Business, which was written by Fred Kaufman some years ago. And these questions, they come from a Gallup survey, and the research was, what do the world's best managers do for their teams? And the people, the world's best managers, they had employees that would answer yes to every single one of these questions on this list. And I think you'll see quite a high correlation between these questions and the things I identified in my talk based around the purpose, the locus of the control, and the community.